table today, we have Scott, and I am very happy and thrilled that Scott has taken out some time to join us here. And Scott has a slightly different background that some of our guests might have, but a background that is certainly intriguing and interesting in the world of negotiation as well. So first and foremost, Scott, thank you so much for taking your time. Could you do a brief introduction of yourself and what you're doing, Scott?
Absolutely, Keld. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you and a pleasure to be with your viewers. My name is Scott Tillema. I am a police officer in the greater Chicago area. My assignment is lieutenant. So my day-to-day work, I oversee patrol operations with the police department where I work. But I think the most interesting part of my professional background is I've spent 7.5 years as a police hostage and crisis negotiator with one of the largest multi-jurisdictional municipal SWAT teams in the country, serving 1.8 million people in the greater Chicago area. And I've been very lucky to have this opportunity and had some tremendous excitement and opportunities to learn about negotiation. And I've really found that this is an area that that I want to learn more about, an area that I enjoy, and an area that I enjoy sharing with others.
Right. Now, this is, of course, very exciting because that is the world of negotiation, but a very different negotiation than what I would call the typical commercial negotiation.
Of course.
So, Scott, how would you compare? What kind of learning or experience from hostage negotiation could you actually move into the world of commercial negotiations or perhaps even political negotiations?
Sure. I think that most police hostage and crisis negotiators are very, very good at empathy and building relationships and establishing a bond with somebody who's in a very tough position.
Right.
And I think that that's one of the most critical pieces to a successful negotiation. And when you look at business negotiation, you have the balance of empathy and assertiveness, but you also bring in the angles that we don't have in policing, where you have value creation and claiming of that value, and that really kind of beyond what most police negotiators are familiar with. So I think the police negotiator's strength is building that relationship, building that bond, using that empathy to connect with someone, which I think is a function of any negotiation. But in negotiation, you have a lot more of what you're teaching, trying to create the value and find the areas that we can both do better in negotiation.
Yeah. Okay. Scott, one of the areas that has a great interest to me in the world of negotiation is trust. And several studies have shown that trust has actually declined in recent years. Back to your work, I'm assuming, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that trust must be a tremendous important part of being a hostage negotiator as well.
It has to be. I think for any negotiator, having credibility is absolutely paramount. If you lose your credibility as a negotiator, you're done. And I think that's similar to both policing and in business. But in police work, I feel like building trust is one of the most critical things that we need to do, because oftentimes we're dealing with somebody who's distrustful of the police in the first, because oftentimes they've had experiences with police that sometimes may not have gone very positively for them. So it's trustful of us. And at the same time, I've encountered behaviors of someone that I'm negotiating with that leads me to believe that I might not be able to trust them. So trust is one of the biggest pieces that we have to do. And when I teach negotiations, I talk about the timing of delivering that message. And often we jump right into saying what we need to say and trying to present our side of the situation before we take time to build that trust with someone else. And that could take minutes, it could take hours, it could take longer than that. But with that trust, we're not going to be able to influence them to get them to where we need them to be.
So in a hostage negotiation, how would you as a professional create trust? How could you do that if you, that's probably a lot of stuff, but if you just give us a few highlights.
Sure. Well, first of all, you can't lie. And I think the movies and the TV shows really kind of show there's manipulation there when really that can't be the case. So number one, don't lie. And when we teach negotiation, we teach very basically just be truthful with them. You can't, maybe you don't have to tell them everything, but certainly don't lie to them. But to build trust with someone, you think about who do you trust? You trust people that you like, people who are familiar to you. So a lot of our negotiations teaching revolves not so much around what to say, but how to say that. And when I talk about delivery and how to say what we say, I really challenge new police negotiators to focus on 5 different areas to help establish that trust. So in the delivery, think about the rate, the rhythm, the tone, the volume, and the pressure of what you say. Because it's easy to say, well, I'm thinking about my delivery and I know what I want to say. But if we can really drill down on how is your rate, if you're too fast, you're going to cause anxiety with somebody else. If you're too slow, you're going to be lethargic and they're going to wonder what's wrong with this person. The volume really, instead of I want to be heard, so I speak louder, I'll bring it down a little bit. If I listen to me, bring it a little more quiet, because that's going to draw you in. So all different components of delivery, I think, makes me a little bit more believable, a little bit more likable, and someone that they can trust. And there's one more piece that I really like to share is vulnerability. And that's really kind of counter to what we're taught as police officers. As police officers from day one, we're taught we show up, we control a situation, we are in command, and that's what police officers are supposed to do. With negotiators, it's a little bit different situation, because police officers generally, if we need to, we can move to a use of force situation and use force to effect that arrest. And in negotiation, generally, we don't have that option to use force on someone, which is very similar to most negotiations, I would suppose. So we have to let them know, hey, you know what, the vulnerability, and say, you know what, I'm a little bit anxious about this too. I'm a little bit concerned too, and not come in with the I'm in charge mindset, and really just let them know, hey, I'm experiencing a little bit of anxiety as well. That can really connect with them, because in most negotiations, the person that we're dealing with is not as emotionally stable, at least initially, as they need to be, for us to be heard and for our message to be acted upon.
Right. You're touching upon something I find is very important, whether we're talking hostage negotiation or commercial negotiation. That is, people tend to be emotional. So that means that regardless what kind of negotiation you're in, if it's important, we have a tendency to become irrational and react with emotions. And typically I find, Scott, that the more qualified negotiator are capable of controlling their emotions. And I was just thinking, in your line of work, obviously it could be life and death, it could be really emotional. How do a professional negotiator in your line of work control their emotions? I mean, that must be a challenge.
It is a challenge. And you look at, I think if you see a lot of these videos that you find online of police officers doing something, I don't want to say stupid, but you say, why are they doing this? You can go back to, they've lost control of their emotion and they've lost control of themselves. And now they're acting in a way that if they could look back and do it differently, they say, I wouldn't have done that. So much of the initial training for police hostage negotiators begins with the role players working to get that negotiator emotional, to try to find the button that they can push to really upset that negotiator. Because once we can understand ourselves and control our emotions, then we can worry about handling someone else. Knowing what bothers me, what upsets me, what can really set me off in a good direction or a bad direction. I'm no good at trying to control anybody else or trying to connect with somebody else if I don't have control of emotions.
Absolutely. Is that piece of advice, I know this is a complicated topic we're talking about, but is there a simple piece of advice you could pass on to our audience about how they could potentially help out not going ballistic in a negotiation?
Sure, absolutely. I think that for me, it comes down to 4 very basic areas to not go ballistic. Negotiation is complicated, and there's books and there's so much information out there. But if you can boil it down to 4 words that anybody can remember, you can get through any situation, even when it's very, very tense. And the first one is understanding. If you put first and foremost in your mind, I need to understand the other party first. I cannot solve the problem if I don't know what it is. I'm always going to work to understand them before I try to share anything about me or anything about my position. Because not only is that respectful, it allows someone to be heard, which is very validating to most people, but it gives you a great tactical advantage, because more they talk, the more information you are going to get. And in negotiation, your success comes from information and options. And the more you have of this, the better you're going to do. So the first piece is work to understand somebody else first. Think about the timing of what you have to say. And in negotiation, we talk of there's a lot of talk of anchoring, and we have to be the first one to put this information out there. And the science really shows that if we anchor, we put our position out there first, that truly holds. But if you do that and you have no information at all, you could be a very, very poor anchor. So think about your timing, understanding timing, delivery. Your question is, how do we remain calm? We always think about what we're going to say next. If instead we think about when we're ready to respond, if we put our focus in how we say what we say, I think we'll be much more successful in connecting with them, because I'm trying to see what works for you and how I can best connect with you, because I'm thinking about my delivery. So we have understanding, timing, delivery, and then respect. And everything we do, if someone feels disrespected, they're not going to come to an agreement with us. If they come to an agreement with us, it's going to be a false agreement. They're not going to follow through on what they're saying they're going to do. So anybody who faces the tense negotiation, they feel their emotions coming up, think about this: understanding, timing, respect. And by doing this over and over and over, we're building a bond with that person. And whether or not they know it, they're beginning to like us, they're beginning to trust us. And once we have that bond, once we have a connection with them, then we can get to influence, which is ultimately where we want to be.
Sure. Okay. Very good advice. Thank you. Scott, World Economic Forum recently published a study where they claim that negotiation is the fifth most important skill, regardless of your job. Is that something that surprised you, that they rank the skill of negotiation that high?
I would say it's probably more important than that. Okay. Any of us that have a job that interacts with any person anywhere needs to understand the basics of negotiation, the basics of having empathy, the basic assertive of where we need to be, the thought of how can we create more value than what I can bring to the table myself and what I even expect, and how can I take some of that for myself. So I would say the basics of negotiation is the most paramount thing that anybody can have. And as we progress into a society where we're glued to our smartphones and our devices, and we forget, and our children don't learn how to connect with each other, those of us who are good listeners, who can really connect with somebody else, are going to excel and succeed in whatever they do. I would say this is an incredibly skill to have, something that we should teach our kids from a very young age.
Right. And that actually leads me on to my next question, Scott. Do you find that people are not aware of the importance of negotiation? I'm not even just referring to the study from World Economic Forum. I'm just talking about people in jobs generally. Are they not aware to a level how important negotiation might be for them?
Absolutely. I think that we can all benefit from learning more about it. But the problem is we communicate all the time. We're always talking to each other. We're always presenting our position. And it would be fascinating to do a study of people who do a lot of talking and present their side or their argument to somebody else. And they walk away feeling that they've won because they've said what they needed to say. So I think misunderstanding in how good we are, because we believe that if we say what we need to say, if we got our position out and we've shared it with another person or with a group of people, somehow we've succeeded in negotiation because we said what we needed to say. And with the internet comments and Facebook and Twitter, everybody's out there saying what they need to say, but nobody's listening and nobody's connecting and getting better results and getting agreements and achieving more.
Right. Scott, would you in general say that leaders are better negotiators than other groups of people, or could they actually be kind of lousy at it as well?
I would say it's the other way around. I would say negotiators are better leaders because you can connect and influence with somebody as a negotiator. That's what leaders do. We have a goal and leadership, and you get your people to work with you to achieve that goal and make them better and together become more. I would negotiators are better leaders. So I would take that question and spin it the other way around.
Right. Great answer. Thank you, Scott. Have you tried to be sitting in a negotiation? I'm sure you have, where you are aware that the counterpart is bluffing and lying. And if yes, you have been in that situation, how did you deal with that?
Sure. Um, I think that it's important in negotiations that we always have to think about how we can help our negotiation partners save face.
Hmm.
And at the end of the day, if I have to come to an agreement where I lose face, it's going to be very difficult or impossible for me to do that. So if I'm dealing with someone and I know they're lying to me or they're bluffing or something like that, I would probably find a way to let them know that I have some information to the contrary and ask clarifying questions. And it would be so important to say, hey, I just want to make sure that I understand your position clearly, because it appears from the information that we have from wherever else we're getting this information, it
Mhm.
might be consistent with what I'm hearing right now.
Mhm.
So give the opportunity to clarify this, because number one, that's going to let them know, hey, this person has done their homework. I'm prepared, and you're not going to lie or somehow manipulate me that I'm not ready for.
Mm.
Um, I we see it right now, and in politics, I think a great negotiation example is occurring right now. You have Donald Trump, who's shutting down the government because he wants this wall, and the Democrats who are saying we're not going to have this wall,
Mm.
and this is down to now, if either side backs down, they're going to lose face in
Mhm.
this. So I don't want to call somebody out as a liar,
Mm.
because then they lose credibility and they
Sure.
can't come to agreement with me without somehow looking foolish.
Sure.
And a very unique situation in American politics. It's going to be fascinating to see how this goes,
Right.
because
Right.
you can't allow somebody to lose face and then expect them to go
Sure.
along with an agreement
Right.
to get where we need to go.
So, on that topic, the wall, if you were an objective advisor that should help both sides reaching an agreement, what kind of advice would you give both parties?
I have no idea. That's a fascinating question, well beyond my expertise. I'm going to pass on that one.
That's absolutely fine. I think it is a difficult one, but I love your advice about trying to avoid losing faith, because that is obviously something that could be a threat in this case. Now, Scott, just before we wrap up, I have another question to you. That is, in my world, and again, please correct me if I'm wrong, but hostage negotiation, couldn't that often be perceived as what I would call a zero-sum negotiation, where one is winning at the expense of the counterpart, or could it actually be a kind of a win-win outcome?
Yeah, we're asked this frequently by people who have some business negotiation background. How do you get more? And it may be a zero sum, because ultimately my goal is to get the hostage, get the innocents out alive and well.
Sure.
Also protect our police officers, protect the public, and if at all possible, make sure that our offender gets out safely as well. And I think that part of this is how we perceive negotiations, how we frame it.
Sure.
And I don't ever want someone who I'm negotiating with
Hmm.
to feel like they've lost. So in the end, they come out, they surrender to police, and things are resolved peacefully. But in their mind, they've somehow won. They've said what they needed to say. They've made the point that they need to make. Somehow achieve something more by having this negotiation with me, by working with police and doing what they need to do. So from an outsider's perspective, the police talked to him, this guy surrendered, he came out, that's what's supposed to happen.
Right.
But the power of framing and how we see it and how we present it to them, for them to see it, is critical, for them to say, you know what, I've accomplished something, I can now surrender because I've done what I needed to do, or I come to a better outcome than I thought I was going to get. So maybe it's a zero sum, but hopefully in my mind we can present it, or in their mind we can present it in a way that they don't feel that they've lost anything at all.
Sure. I fully understand that. Do you believe, Scott, that a good professional hostage negotiator, could he or she move from that type of job into a political or commercial negotiation role?
Well, I think that there is a lot more, and I've taken over the last couple of years some classes and seminars in business negotiation. And I think it's a bit arrogant for police negotiators to say, you know what, I'd be a fantastic business negotiator without learning the background of value and the technical knowledge of whatever business they're working in. But police negotiators become so good at connecting people. It's very natural. They're very warm. They're very likable. They're very good at eliciting information in an unsuspecting way, almost, not to sound manipulative, but they're very good at making someone comfortable and getting information out. And I think that the best negotiators are the ones that can connect with someone else. And by having that connection, it really lays the groundwork for a relationship of negotiation. So certainly I think they have a terrific advantage, but there's a lot more work needed than to simply move me as a police negotiator and set me down in the corporate world and say, all right, kid, good luck, get to it.
Sure. Perhaps you already answered my last question, Scott. And my last question is, based on your intensive career and experience, what would be the most important advice you could give anyone on the science of negotiation?
Well, first of all, let them know that there is a science of negotiation. That's been proven over and over, that the people who come into a negotiation and say, you know what, I would be a good negotiator because I know how to talk to someone. You already missed it. You've already proven that you don't understand what it takes to be a good negotiator. But to let them know that there is a science to it, a science to anchoring, a science to loss aversion versus gaining more. There's so much beyond just, hey, I'm a good talker to be a good negotiator. So my advice would be, humble yourself. And every time you think you're a good negotiator, you need to do more reading. You need to watch more videos, listen to more podcasts. There are true experts out there that are very, very good at this craft. And as soon as you think you're good, you better humble yourself and get to meet more people, go to more conferences, and be better. We should always feel that when I'm asked, am I a good negotiator? I better not have, yes, I'm great at this, because there's so many people I want to learn from and want to learn what they do. So my advice is take time to learn, to read, but more importantly, to practice. I get the most knowledge from reading the most books or watching the most videos or whatever it might be, but we become good by practicing this every day. And whatever you're doing, any interaction, practice listening, practice understanding, practice your delivery, and to find out that opens doors that's going to create tremendous opportunities for agreement and for growth. And it's so much fun. Enjoy it and practice.
Thank you ever so much, Scott. It was very useful. I am thrilled and happy that you took out the time to spend this with me on this topic. Thanks a million, Scott.
Keld, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.